talked to Alvin tonight, and remember when we sent out the email, we're trying not to get into any specific property appraisals. Alvin's here to talk about how they come up with their values for taxation of the property. And it's not real estate agent's fault, just so you know that. Okay?
That's not what he told me.
If you want to blame it anymore, blame it on the buyers. They're the ones that want in this neighborhood, okay? It's a great neighborhood and people are wanting in here. So, a couple of notes and then we'll turn it over. Street paving is on task. Y'all may have started to see some strange alien-like markings on your curbs and sidewalks and things like that around the neighborhood. They're going through and marking like where utility stuff is, or sidewalks that need to be repaired and things like that they'll come through and do when they do the paving. So we're getting pretty close to having the work done. And the silent crossings are still in progress, late summer to early fall. Union Pacific does the work, so their crews do the work. All the contracts supposedly are signed and in their proper file cabinets and so forth. So, and for right now, it's just a matter of us being in Union Pacific work schedule. And my understanding last week from the city was it's late summer to early fall when that's going to happen. We have the 4th of July parade coming up here in a couple months. What day is that on, John? I'm just kidding.
It's a Wednesday.
Those of you that are new to the neighborhood, what time do we meet? About 9:30?
9 o'clock is when it starts, so we start meeting at 8:30.
At 8:45, okay. At Deepwood Elementary, just gang up in the parking lot, and if you want to come be in the parade, just come be in the parade. You can walk in it, you can ride a bike in it, you can pull a wagon in it, you can ride a motorcycle, or if you have a fancy car you want to ride, you just whatever. It's just a chance for the neighbors to go through, and then the rest of the neighbors that aren't in it come out in their front yards and watch you guys, and we have a good time. We meet down at the park, and then we have some snacks, and then break up for the day. So, unfortunately, it does conflict with the City of Round Rock Parade, so we don't really have another time to have ours. We can't really have it any earlier. If we push it any later, it's too hot, and nobody comes. So, and then in October, still a ways out, is National Night Out. So we're going to be starting to, in a couple, 3 months, we're going to start talking about volunteers for to help out with National Night Out. We'll be sending that out. Last month's meeting, we had the candidates forum for the 4 city council candidates and the 4 candidates for the Upper Brushy Creek Water Control and Improvement District. I have purposely not sent that video out yet or posted it because the election is coming up here. Early voting starts on Monday, April 23rd and ends on Saturday, April 28th with election day on May 5th. So I'm going to send that out right before early voting starts so you can kind of refresh your mind of the candidates and so forth. You get a chance to see it online, and they all came to us and spoke to us. It's both there's 2 city council seats up, 2 candidates for each seat. And on the Upper Brushy Creek board, there's 2 seats available on that board with 4 candidates, and it's just the top 2 vote getters in that one that get the seats. So listen to those. If you have any questions about either one of those, give me a call. The WCID election is when they'll probably talk about it a little bit tonight. It's that who cares tax at the bottom of your list of all those taxes on your appraisal. It's the one down there that most people probably spend more at Starbucks every month than that tax is for the year. It's like 30, 40, 50 bucks maybe for the year. That's for our dams and flood control of creeks and so forth to keep the neighborhood safe. And we're still working on building 2 more dams to take, for those of you that might be in the floodplain, to try to take all of the houses in the neighborhood out of the floodplain. So that's that board. So that's an important election for you guys to listen to the candidates and vote for the right people. I think that's all I had on my, I'm going to start passing this around. I have 2 sign-up sheets here. Poor Don's wearing out. I mean, I'm starting to have to replace his batteries like once a week now. So we got to get him some help with stuff. So there's 2 sign-up sheets here. One is for a sign squad. And what the sign squad does, how many times a year?
For every event.
10 months.
As well as
4th of July makes 11, National Night Out makes 12, and then voting. So about 13 or 14 times a year, got to run out and put signs out for whatever the event is, whether it's vote early, whether it's election day, whether it's meeting. We need to go out and put those signs out. So we need get Don some help. If two to three people are doing that, it'll take about 20 minutes. Is all it takes to put them out, and then after that event, go out and pick them up. So we just need to get Don some help. I'll pass this around if anybody wants on that. we'll fill that committee and then assign someone to be in charge of it, and then you guys, and Don can give you all the information, maps, slides, 8x10 glossies, everything that he's got about where all the signs go. So he's got books about this stuff. And the other one is an event committee. We did have someone who was going to be our kind of event chair, and it turns out she was not able to do that. So we need a few people to just kind of help kickstart the events as they're coming up on the calendar, like the 4th of July parade, for example. There's not a lot that's involved in that, but still some things need to be done. The biggest one is probably National Night Out. That requires the most volunteers, the most footwork, the most planning, and so forth. So I'm looking for a committee to help put that together. That doesn't mean you guys, I don't mean for you guys to be doing all the work for those events. I mean you to help plan those events, and then we'll send out emails recruiting the volunteers for those events. So if you're interested in helping out in either one of those, I'm going to pass these around, kind of circulate them back, and they'll come back up this way. Okay, before we turn it over, any neighborhood questions not related to the appraisal district? Nothing? Wow, you're in trouble.
Here for me.
Alan was here last year, a lot of good information that'll clear up a lot of things about how these appraisals are done. And he'll show you that somebody doesn't come out to your house and sneak around it and write numbers down, and he'll show you how all that's done tonight. And we've got Chad Chadwell here, who's on the Board of Trustees for the school district, but he's also on the appraisal board. And he's going to come up and talk a couple minutes, and then he'll turn it over to Alvin. If I'm not here when we're done, I may have to skip out a little early tonight, but we'll see. So thank you guys all for coming.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everybody. As Mike said, my name is Chad. My real name is Charles Chadwell, and I live over here at 810 St. Williams, in Walsh and St. Williams, right up the street from Deepwood, where the portables are. I've been in this neighborhood for over 20 years, and it's a great neighborhood. I had no idea when I moved in that the schools were going to be so close and so good. And I had two young sons who were preschool, worked out great, and just over the time they went to Deepwood, Chisholm Trail, and Round Rock High School. So I've stayed here. I got on the school board 10 years ago. I was involved with the PTAs and booster clubs, things like that, with my sons, and just happened to end up in the booster clubs. And then there was an opening for the school board, so I've been on that for 10 years. There was somebody who was on the appraisal board before me, and he was on the school board, but he had to get off because we annexed, if you remember, 6 years ago or so, Round Rock, this city of Round Rock and Round Rock ISD annexed ACC, so he had to step off, and I filled that. So I've been on there for 6 years or so now, and had no idea what I was getting into, but it's a very important role that all of us play together. What Alvin is going to do, what he's going to tell you about. What I do as a school board trustee in setting the tax rate, as Mike said, the water, the dam district, WCID, is a very small amount of your tax, your total tax every year. The school district, unfortunately, is the largest taxing your tax rate because we get all of the funds for the teachers, and 88% of all the taxes that are the maintenance and operations go to pay for the staff. So when people say, well, just cut spending, cut wasteful spending, things like that, there's not a whole lot of room to cut. As you all likely know, we're all squeezing our budgets as tight as we can. I'm not here to talk about the school district. I think all of you know, living here, that the schools are pretty good. Certainly Deepwood is great, Chisholm and Round Rock, and then all the way across. We have 3 school campuses here in our neighborhood, but across the district we have over 50, almost 55, depending on how you count. 5 high schools, 10 middle schools, 11 middle schools, and 34 elementaries, and then a couple alternative schools. But it's very important. And so there are 7 of us on the school board. We're going to have a very heated and contentious meeting this Thursday night. You're all welcome to come in and watch. You get in free if you mention my name. You can come late and you can leave early. All we ask is that you be quiet, just come in. There's going to be a couple of contentious things over grading and the Westwood feeder pattern, and then this bond study committee that's going on. So that's the kind of stuff we deal with. But one of the things that we never worry about is the appraisals that we get from Alvin and his group. We know that he's doing this right now. He's going out and everybody got their appraisal in the mail. You got a number. You're probably shocked a little bit, like, oh my gosh, 10%. On one hand, I want to say that's a blessing. I know it's higher taxes for most of us in here. Under 65, it's a higher tax bill that we'll have to write. And the school district will set our tax rate this summer, or we'll set our budget this summer. Then we'll set our tax rate in the fall in September. and then you'll get your tax bill in October that says for the coming year it's going to be X amount. What Alvin does and what his group and he does a phenomenal job. He's one of 253 appraisal districts across the state. Potter County and Amarillo just merged together, run that from you, right? So, there's 254 counties, but he's one of the most respected across the state. So a lot of people look to what Williamson Central Appraisal District does as far as technology, and they copy it. And as far as I know, you're always welcome. You say you're very open with what you do with all of that. So in the long run, what the good news about that is, we don't have to worry about the appraisals. You're welcome to, and he'll tell you more about this in a few minutes, but he does a phenomenal job of measuring all the houses. He's doing it a little bit different than what all the real estate agents are doing. That real estate agents come in, as Mike was just saying here earlier, people come in, if you have a house for sale here, multiple offers, or they'll offer 5% over, and that raises the price up. As we all know, we've lived here for more than a few years in this neighborhood. This is a pretty good neighborhood. It's very, very desirable. It's close to the roads, close to schools, hospitals, higher education, shopping. It's great. People are moving out of Austin because they're moving here because they can't afford it there. And so we're feeling a little bit of a pinch here. We're feeling a pinch on the school district because our teachers have a hard time living here, living close by. But we'll make it work. So again, we appreciate everybody's involvement and their commitment to it. So there are 7 of us trustees on the school board. There are 6 of us on the appraisal board. And this gentleman just walked in, Larry Gaddis, is another important name you'll see. He sits to my left. He's on the appraisal board as well. He's also the tax assessor and tax collector. So you might look at that and say, oh, that's the guy who writes a big check. But he also plays a very important role because Alvin will set the appraisal value, $100,000, $200,000, whatever your house is valued at. He also appraises all of the commercial properties, La Frontera, all of the apartment complexes, retail, IKEA. He goes in and he measures all that. And he gets great values on that. He takes that number, he hands it off to the taxing entities, the school district, the city, the county, the water district, and says, here's how much, boom, $1 billion, $20 billion, $30 billion, whatever. Here's how much all of your property combined is worth. From there, then the taxing entities, the city, the school district, the county, they all work backwards and they said, okay, we need X amount of dollars to hire so many teachers and all that. So at that point, then we turn it over to Larry Gaddis here, and he's the one who does the collections for us. He's very busy in January, well, last few months of the year. Everybody says, if you paid it, you get all your escrow and goes in there. So anyway, you're going to get an insight, and I'll stay as late as anybody wants and ask any questions about the school board. I'll answer what I can about the appraisal district, but I'm going to refer all the technical stuff to Alvin, and hopefully Larry will be available as well. But we're all in this together. We're not out to get anybody or any neighborhood. We're not, we'll see comments every now and then, and people open their appraisal list and their notices, and oh my gosh, you guys are trying to kill us. It's just, as you all know, everybody in the paper, you read in the paper every week, there's a story, the supply and demand. There's, 2-month supply in different pockets, when it should be 6 months, and I'm sure I'm going to go into that. When that happens, the prices go up. So we're all in it together. But anyway, so I'm available. I'll stay. You all are always welcome. Like I said, I live at the end of Walsh in St. Williams. I'm out there. If I'm working in the yard, you're welcome to pull over, which people do, walk by. My neighbor Don here. I see other people that walk by that pull over. There's strollers, there's dogs. I'll talk to anybody anytime, and we'll see if we can get the answer. But anyway, so again, I'm going to turn it over to Alvin, their chief appraiser. And if I think of anything that he says in the middle, I may jump in, but otherwise, he's the man. So thanks for being here, Alvin.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. How are you all? Good turnout. Quick question. How many of y'all were here last year for my presentation last year? A few hands. That's good. There's a lot of new people. Those of you who were here last year, you're going to see much of the same thing that you saw last year this year. But it is, I find this presentation to be a good overview of what we do at the appraisal district, and it's really informative to those that don't really know much about what we do. So I'd hate to cater it to just those that were here last year and change up everything, because this is really one of the more informative presentations that I do. As said, I'm Alvin Langford. I've been with the appraisal district for about 17 years. Started as chief appraiser in March of 2009. So I've been at this for a little while. We have a pretty big job ahead of us. We have over 217,000 properties that we have to value every year. To put perspective on this, when I interviewed at the appraisal district years ago, I still remember one of the questions, and that was, do you realize what we do? At the time, I didn't. I applied for a job in the classified ads and had no idea what an appraisal district actually was. But I learned very quickly after that. He said that everything that we drive by in this county, if you drive in this county, everything you drive by, the appraisal district puts a value on. So just think about that. Every convenience store, every billboard, every residential home, everything in the county we put a value on. And just think about how big of a job that is. It's 217,000 properties that we're doing every year evaluation on. So we don't do as detailed of a work as what you would imagine that if you've had a mortgage appraisal done, where they spend a little bit of time with your property, a little bit of time, sometimes a couple of days on your property. We couldn't do that with 217,000. Unless you guys just want to pay us a lot more money. I can have as many appraisals as you'd like, but yeah, we're not going to be able to do that. It's a big, big job. There's over 1,100 square miles we have to cover in our county, so it's a pretty large area, and our total market value is $79 billion. Not because I work there, but I will tell you in 2009 when I took over, that value was somewhere around $37 billion. Just to give you an idea how fast this county is growing, not only in population, but in valuation, because the number of properties that have been coming in every year, as well as the valuations of individual properties going up over that time as well because of that demand. So let's start off with Appraisal District 101. Appraisal districts were created back in 1980 and 81. The legislature basically recognized a problem. Back before that time, valuations were done by the same people that set the tax rates. So a school district or a city, they had a valuation department. So they were in charge of not only the valuation, but also the tax rate. Anybody see a little bit of a problem with being in charge of both sides of the equation? I can raise one, lower one, whatever. There's kind of a problem there, right? So they recognized that problem. There was a lot of speculation there was wrongdoing going on. And so they created an appraisal district to basically separate that from the taxing jurisdictions and from the voting populace. As you can imagine, if I were to have to run for my job, what would be the number one thing that I would run on, right? Low values. I want to keep your values really low. You'll love me because I'll keep your values really low. Would that help anyone? Would it be accurate? Would it be fair? Absolutely not. And so it's a good thing to have that separation. That's why we were created back in 81. I want to point out a couple things on this slide. One is we have to appraise at 100% of market value. We don't have any choice in the matter because the state actually audits us on that value. They come in every other year and they check our values based on the sales. And if we are not within 5% of what those sales are going for, we lose funding for the school districts. So it's really important for us to be right at that. And there is absolutely no incentive for me to be over that. And the reason for that is because it really upsets people and we get a lot of protests. I don't want to see more than the 50,000 protests that we already saw this past year. I don't want to see 200,000 protests of people coming through our door. There is no incentive for that. As a board member, Chad will tell you, they can't even talk to me about valuation. They can't tell me to raise values. They can't tell me to lower values, none of that. And so there's that separation that I was talking about. So it's really important for y'all to understand that we have to be at 100% of market value, and I have no incentive to go over it, nor do I ever want to, because you guys really get upset with me when I do. So that has to take place on January 1 every year. So the appraisal date we're looking at is January 1st. We're not looking at what it would sell for in June. What it sells for on January 1. So keep that in mind. If the market is going up over time, and say it went up 5% since June, well, we need to adjust sales 5% to what they would be worth as of January 1. So those sales are adjusted based on that appraisal date. Let's talk about a little bit about the organization. So the citizens, you guys of Williamson County, elect the taxing units board. Okay, so city councils, county commissioners, board of trustees for the schools. You elect those guys. They then turn around and elect the appraisal district board of directors. Okay, so that's that separation, pulling it away from the voting populace, but putting it in charge of elected officials. Then the governing body the appraisal district board of directors appoints the chief appraiser. So they govern the appraisal district. I run the appraisal district's day-to-day operations. So they approve things like the budget and that sort of thing, and I am the one in charge of getting those valuations out and certified on time to the taxing jurisdictions. On the other side of the chart here, separated now, is the Appraisal Review Board. The Appraisal Review Board is a group of citizens that when you have a protest with the appraisal district and we cannot come to an agreement, you then go on to an Appraisal Review Board hearing. It's kind of like a semi-judicial thing, semi-formal. 3 people sitting there listening to your case and listening to the appraisal district's case and deciding between those. So those people are appointed by the administrative law judge, Betsy Lambeth, in our county right now. They're appointed by her because, again, separating that out from us, we shouldn't be in charge of appointing those people. Put it in the charge of someone that's an elected official, get it away from the appraisal district. Let's talk a little bit about the phases in the property tax calendar. So the field work phase happens from about July through January each year. That's when we're out measuring a lot of the new improvements. Just to give you an idea, this past year we had 7,200 new homes that were built in our county. That is a lot of homes that are coming. The reason they're being built is because of all the people moving into our area. But our staff puts a tape measure on at least 2 sides, if it's just a rectangle or a square, but usually more, on every single one of those properties every year. So our job a lot, because where we're at in the growth, is just to measure the new stuff coming in. So it's a really demanding job not to just measure the new stuff, but also go out and value everything else as well. Then at that time, we come back in the office, we analyze what we picked up out in the field, we analyze what sales information that we were able to obtain throughout the year, and we then appraise properties. So I'm going to get into a little bit about how we appraise residential properties. I'm just going to kind of glaze over the surface, but I'll be happy to answer a lot of questions about that later on after the presentation as well. So what appraisers do is they utilize a market area. That's a fancy word for neighborhood, okay? Now, a neighborhood itself, or your subdivision, may be split into multiple market areas based on the properties that are in there. So for instance, if you have a home builder that comes in and builds very, very big, large homes, nice homes in one area, you wouldn't want to compare those to maybe a lesser quality home in another, even though they're within the same subdivision boundaries. Does that make sense? So we actually will separate those out into 2 areas and try to value them independently, because if you're looking for a comparable sale of what your property would sell for, you wouldn't go to that other area. You would want to look at the ones that are like yours. So this is y'all's market area, and that is a really poor picture, but I'm not sure I can do much about it. If you can see, outlined in blue, kind of where I'm tracing around right now, is your neighborhood, your market area. So this is Round Rock West. And so those are the area, that's the area that we appraise to appraise your properties. That's the sales we use to appraise your properties. So these are those sales, okay, that we use this year. We take all of those sales and we take our appraised value of the property. So our appraised value is composed of what it costs to construct a home minus the depreciation associated with the age of the home. Does that make sense? So if it was brand new today, it may cost $200,000 to build your house, but since you're a 1977 year built house, it's going to depreciate over time because it's older, right? And if it's remodeled, then that depreciation would come off of the house and we would address the value with that. And so once you've taken the cost minus depreciation, we take that value and then we move it up or down based on where those values are hitting compared to the sales that we have in the neighborhood. So for instance, if the average sale price or the median sale price is $200,000 and our values are at $180,000, we need to go up 10% to be able to get to the $200,000 sale prices that are out there. Does that make sense? So we're moving them up or down based on all the sales in the neighborhood. Not specific sales, but all the sales in the neighborhood. So these are those sales. You won't be able to see it from back in the back of the room, but we try to go for that 100% appraisal to sale ratio, which is listed here. And what we're looking at is a very tight grouping around that 100%. We don't want some that are at 150 and some that are at 50. We want a very tight grouping, so all of them are appraised real close to what they should sell for.
Can I ask you a quick question
Sure.
on that? When you said you look at the whole neighborhood and get the sales for that and it's a group, what do you have in your program that accounts for someone house who is a 2-story versus a single, or a 5-bedroom versus a 2-bedroom? Because just because the median sale is this doesn't mean everyone's house is.
That's where that cost that I was talking about, when I was talking about cost minus depreciation. So what it would cost to build your home, that specific home, 2-story, 5-bedroom, whatever it is, that value minus depreciation times that factor to move those values up or down. So all that is figured into the original base price before it ever gets to the valuation of moving properties up or down. So right now, you wouldn't have a two-story, 3,000 square foot house that's valued at the same thing as a one-story, 2,000 square foot house, because the model, that cost that we originally came up with, is going to be different. However, we will move them all up or down equally based on what the sales are telling us. So there should be a difference there in the value based on the individual property characteristics, but as far as the increase or decrease, it's based on all the sales within that neighborhood.
And how do you get your depreciation? Where does that come from?
It comes from sales. So what we look at is what a brand new property sold for versus what a house that may be 5 years old of a similar type sells for. And that difference is how we attribute depreciation. And so it's based on, the items that depreciate, the items that go bad over time, your roof, your AC unit, your carpet, your paint, those things over time go bad. People pay less for those items later on, so that depreciation is figured from what you guys, you participants in the marketplace, are actually paying for that difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. I'm just trying to figure out how you get to figure out, take into consideration the specifics of a property. Because I understand your general approach because you have so much property, but comparing apples to apples instead of apples to oranges.
Sure. Specifically, is your question on what's inside the house?
Well, that or just the depreciation and things like that, or how you value. I mean, the comps that you picked, are those how you try to adjust for the particulars of someone's property versus just what the market is?
I'm going to get to a lot of that in a few slides. I'm kind of explaining you how those differences are. Maybe it'll explain it better seeing it than maybe I can explain to you right now.
Okay.
Just to give you a general overview right now of Round Rock West sales, Round Rock West information. There's 724 homes within Round Rock West, about a median square footage of around 2,100 square feet, all built in the 70s. We had 31 sales within your area at a median sale price of $287,900. The median change this year from last year was about 5.5%. Just to give you an idea, we were about 6% countywide. So that's actually right in line with what we were seeing countywide. Land values, your lot values are somewhere around $58,000 to $60,000. We do have two different quality levels of homes identified within the neighborhood. What we call a class 3 and a class 4. Those are just a quality level designation that we get to identify some of what you were talking about, a lower quality home versus a higher quality home. So that's some details about Round Rock West itself. So after we've gathered all that sales information that I talked about and valued those properties, we send those properties out, those property notifications out at the beginning of April. Y'all just got them, right? We call them the Notice of Appraised Value. Stop right here and talk to you a little bit about that. We're the only governmental body that I know of that actually sends out an individual invitation to each and every one of you to grade us on our work. When we put a value on your property, and if you don't like that value, you have the opportunity to protest that value. You don't see taxing jurisdictions that send out an individual invitation when they're going to widen a road, or when they're going to build a bridge, or they're going to build a school. You're not sending that individual invitation for everybody to vote on that. Now, you might vote on a bond that would be associated with that, but you're not going to get that individual invitation to do so, right? And so that's what we send out on early April of every year. That first part of April, we do something unique here in our county that's not done in many, and that is we have a walk-in period. So this walk-in period just kind of gives you the ability, if you have a really busy schedule, instead of trying to set up an appointment to come and see us, you get the opportunity to just walk in off the street, come in and meet with an appraiser and understand a little bit more about your particular appraisal on your home. That lasts for about 5 weeks. On your notice, you'll have a period of time that is assigned to your group of properties. And so look on your notice for that time frame of when that you can come in and talk with our appraisal district staff. So at that meeting, you're going to see some of the information I'm going to get into in a few minutes. But you're going to meet with an appraiser, and you're going to make a decision on whether or not you agree with the determined value at that time. And if you do not agree with the determined value, you need to file your protest by the deadline. The deadline this year is May 15th. It's changed. It used to be May 31st. It's backed up to May 15th. And so if you do not agree, if you do agree, you can sign off right then if we've made you a value offer or you understand how the valuations were done, and your protest is over at that point. that's done. If you have filed a protest timely by the deadline, then we'll send you a date and time to come and meet with an appraiser. This is the kind of the hearing time frame that I was talking about a while ago, that if you walk in, you don't have to worry about that, but if you choose to do it later, this is your appointed time to come see us. Same type of process. We're going to send you that date and time. You're going to come in and meet with an appraiser, and then you're going to make a decision on whether or not you agree or disagree with that appraiser. The difference here is when you agree, it's the same, your protest is finalized. If you disagree, though, you go to that appraisal review board that I was talking about a few minutes ago. So you'll go to that group of 3 individuals, you'll plead your case, the appraisal district will plead theirs, and they'll make a decision based on what evidence you present. So if you go to the ARB, you still don't like the value you've got, you've been able to get, you have an ability after that to file an arbitration, binding arbitration, file a lawsuit, or file an appeal to the State Office of Administrative Hearings. So there's some extra steps you can take if you feel you really just haven't received the valuation that you need after that point. So what do you see when you come in and meet with an appraiser? This is what I was talking about a while ago, man, where I was talking about how you're going to see the differences between properties. So when we send out that appraisal notice, we're looking at everything in the neighborhood as I described, right? We're looking at all the sales and we're moving values up or down based on all those sales. When you come in, we take a more specific look at your property. So instead of looking at 30-something sales of Round Rock West, we look at your particular home and we say, okay, you've got a 2,500 square foot home, it's a certain quality level and it's a certain age. Now let's go look at those 34 sales and let's pick out the ones that are most like your property. So in size and quality and age, we want the ones that are most like your property. So after we've done that, and you'll see this is the subject property on the left, these are all the comparable sales on the right that we've chosen that are the best comparables for yours. Then what we do is we adjust for differences. So for instance, if one of those sales has a swimming pool and you don't have a swimming pool, we can't compare that sale without at least adjusting for that swimming pool. Does that make sense? We need to subtract that swimming pool valuation out before we would ever adjust it to yours or compare it to yours to get to the apples to apples that you were talking about a while ago. So all those adjustments are done down here. So if you have a different land value, you have maybe one of them has a 3-car garage versus a 2-car garage, all those adjustments need to be placed on those comparable sales to make it just like your property. Then, after all those adjustments are made, we look at the median value of these comparable sales and we tell you what that value is in comparison with what we originally placed on the property using that mass appraisal technique of using all the sales. Now we're looking at just those few, making adjustments to those few and coming up with a value. So if that value supports the value we did with using the other methodology, we're going to tell you that it doesn't look like there's any ability for us to make a change to your valuation. That's when you could make your decision on whether or not to go to the ARB or not, that sort of thing. If it doesn't support the value we had on it, we may be able to offer you a small change to the property, and that would be offered at that time. That's when you have to make that decision, which way you want to go after that point. So that's if you protest, if your property is over what it would sell for. That's the #1 methodology of protest. It's called a market value protest. I don't believe my property is worth what the appraisal district put on it, okay? So there's another methodology that's very different than that, but similar in the approach, and we'll get into that next. One thing before I leave this slide I want to point out is we're not just comparing you to any home. You'll know these addresses because they're in your neighborhood. You'll know these homes because we have pictures of every single one of those homes. So you'll be able to look at that house and go, yeah, you're right, that does look a lot like mine. We wouldn't compare you against one that's a mansion. You'd be able to see that and look, the quality level is completely different. We're going to give you some confidence in where they're at or what they look like. Not only that, we're going to show you where they're at. So this slide shows you right now that here's the subject property. I picked just a house in y'all's neighborhood and then looked at the comparables. And you're seeing the comparable sales within the neighborhood that we use for that house. So those sales are what we're going to use and make those adjustments to that I was talking about a while ago. Again, adding confidence to what we use to value your property. So, remember I told you the first methodology is I don't believe you valued it appropriately, it wouldn't sell for that. The other methodology of protest that's most popular is I don't believe my home is valued like someone else's. For instance, if someone else has a very similar home to yours and they're valued $20,000 less than you, you probably want to know why, right? You want to know, well, Why are they getting a better deal than me? And so this is called equal and uniform. Our value is unequal compared with other properties like mine. So that's the difference in the type of protest. However, the methodology is very similar. So instead of starting with sales, though, here at the top, what we start with is our valuations on those properties. So what we want to look at is, okay, you said your house is not worth, or your house should be worth what these other ones are at a lower valuation. Well, we still need to address the differences between those houses and yours. So for instance, if your house has a pool, let's look at it the other way, right? And one of these other comparable properties does not have a pool, we need to add value to that other property to make it like yours. Or any of those differences, take them, an add value or take away value based on any of the differences that I just mentioned for your property. So you're looking at the square footage difference, you're looking at the land value, the amount of garage space you have, the amount of porches, pools, all that value. We want to make adjustments for those differences. And at the bottom down here, you'll come up to a valuation based on those other properties' values. And I will tell you, because we use the methodology I described a while ago, where we're using tables based on sales to value the properties to begin with, we don't go in and individually appraise this property, individually appraise that property, and have some differences in the way they're appraised. We appraise them all very similarly. So it's very seldom that you see much of a change based on this, because we are very similar in the model we're using with everybody. So we do a very good job of trying to model what happens within each type of property, within each neighborhood. So you're not going to see a lot of relief based on this protest usually. Not to say that there isn't relief, but it's not nearly as common as looking at that more specific group of sales. And so those are the two most common methods of protest that you'll see. After the protest season is over, the reason we know it's over is because you stopped showing up. No, I'm just kidding. It's because you guys, when you protested your property, you have lowered the amount of the roll that is acceptable to a taxing jurisdiction to set the rate. They need to be confident in the value that we give them, that it's not going to change very much. And so what we look at is they give us about 3 months or so from the time we send out notices to the time that we have to be at 95% of the value unprotested. So they have at least got 95% of the value that they're going to be able to use to establish their tax rate that's not going to change. You can imagine how that might be if you were to set a tax rate to multiply this by when the target is moving, right? You can't do that very effectively. So we give that out to them once we've hit 95%. That has to happen by July 25th each year. So we'll turn that over to those taxing jurisdictions. They establish the rate. Chad was just talking about that, based on their needs, okay? One thing I'll point out here is that taxing jurisdictions have the ability to be more flexible with their rate than what the appraisal district does on their valuation. As I mentioned a while ago, we have to be at least 95 to 100% of market value, otherwise the state then comes in and makes the schools lose funding. We're not going to go over 100% of market value because you guys come in and protest. However, tax rates, there is some flexibility, right? So there's a few rates you need to pay attention to. One of them is your effective tax rate, which is the rate it would take to collect a similar amount of tax revenue that it was the prior year. In other words, not raising taxes because you're lowering the rate commensurate with the amount of value increase. Or the actual rate, which is the rate from last year that they actually used, or your proposed tax rate, which is what they're proposing to do. What you see often is you see tax rates that may drop a little bit. You'll see headlines that taxing jurisdictions have lowered the rate by, a penny or whatever. And if you do the math, usually it's a point or two, or if you look at the percentage, it's 1 or 2% down. When you have values growing at 6% and you come down just 2% on the tax rate, what happened to the taxes? They went up, right? Because there's still 4%, right, of additional growth based on the new value. And so it's real important to keep in mind the first part of the equation is the protest season I just described. We had 52,000 people that took advantage of the protest season to come in and talk about that value. That I don't really have a whole lot of choice. I got to be right where I put that value based on what I was just telling you. And Larry, how many people showed up to the county's tax rate hearing this year?
Out of 550,000 residents in Williamson County, 2 people stood up at the podium.
seem like a slight disparity there to you guys? You know, everybody gets involved on the valuation side, nobody gets involved on the rate side. Kind of goes back to that individual invitation that I was talking about. I say this only to make you aware that it is really important for the citizenry of any county to get involved in the entire process. If you're concerned about property taxes, you're welcome to protest your value. That's a part of what we're here for. But get involved in that tax rate as well. Go in there and speak your mind. If they are raising taxes on you every year by just lowering that rate a little bit, but still getting more and more revenue every year, make sure that that additional revenue that they're getting is needed. It may very well be, you guys may have said, I want better roads, or I want new schools, or whatever, and they have to raise those, keep those rates high. But if not, then you guys need to get involved in that second part and make sure that they're just not maintaining that rate and the additional revenue is being generated every year, because the valuations that we've done at the appraisal district kind of doing the work for them. Does that make sense? All right, so we turn that over to the taxing jurisdictions. They establish their rate. They turn over their rate and our valuation over to Larry's office, tax assessor collector. And Larry, I've heard you do this quote many times. He goes, I do math. That's all I do. Value times rate equals your taxes, and then I collect them, right? So that, when I say blame him, he really doesn't have a whole lot to do with it. He's just doing the math, unless he does the math wrong. So I mean, we might want to pay attention to that. But really, his part is to take the two equations that have been, or two parts of the equation that have been presented to him, do the math, send out bills, collect the value, or collect the taxes from those, and then distribute that money back out to those taxing jurisdictions to be able to use. So that happens. Tax bills go out in October, November timeframe. You guys usually pay them by February, the beginning of February. Otherwise, you start getting some delinquency penalties and fees you don't want. Yeah, so make sure you get it done. And then the process for us, after we've turned that rollover, basically starts right back over at the beginning. We go back to the field, we start measuring new homes, we start gathering sales information, all that stuff. So our process ends about right here. Here's where the taxing jurisdictions and Larry's office take effect, and penalties and interest are due out here. But once this process ends for us, we just start right back at the beginning and field work. That's kind of our year. So let's talk a little bit about our website. I want to hit on a really cool tool that we've created for every one of you to use. First, let's look at the homepage. Advertise that our protest deadline has changed because it's different. It is May 15th. It's the first thing you're going to see when you come on our website. The most used portion of our website is this line right here, and it's the property search. This is where you go in and you enter your name or your address or whatever, you look up your property, right? Right below here is a bunch of buttons here that you can click on for various parts of our website. One of them is called a property owner portal. Write that down, it's really important. Property owner portal is where you're going to go in and you can see things like videos about how we do what we do. In fact, one of the videos in there explains that valuation process. Another video explains that protest process I just went through. So if you didn't catch it, and as fast as I've been talking tonight, maybe you can go on there and watch that video. They're somewhere around 5 to 10 minutes long max. They're very handy to have. We've got 8 different videos on there. If you have ag valuation property, we give you a video on how to do the application process, how to file your homestead exemption has been out there, a bunch of different information out there that we have for you guys. We were one of the first appraisal districts in the state to even put out videos of this nature, the first to do one on protest phase and that sort of thing, because we want you guys to feel less intimidated about the process. I can tell you, when I sit there as an appraiser and sit across from individuals such as yourself, the number one comment after we were all said and done was something like, well, that was a lot less painful than I thought it was going to be, or that wasn't that hard. You know, that type of thing happens because they're just unfamiliar with the process. And so when we came up with the idea of putting these videos out, we put it out there to take that part of the equation out, right? Okay, now you know what it looks like. We literally take the camera and we go into an appraiser's cubicle and show you what a cubicle looks like that you're going to walk into. It's that simple. We tell you the types of things that you need when you come in for a protest. All of that. We show you those comparison grids that I was just showing you a while ago. We give you all that information ahead of time to say, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. This is the things I need to go in there, and I feel comfortable when I show up instead of just completely feeling like you don't know what you're getting yourself into. So that's why those videos are out there. Next thing I want to point out is when you do look up your property, this is a screen that comes up, and I apologize for the picture quality on this. I'm going to have to get a better projector for these things, but what you have here is the name of the property owner, the property address, the value that's currently on it, property details that are below this. A few other things like homestead exemption are on there. If you want to file your homestead exemption, we've done that all online. I've heard, I think Larry, your quote sticks out in my mind. I think it took you like a minute and a half to file your homestead exemption when you bought your house. It just gives you an idea that it's much more efficient to use an online process than it is to file it paper and that sort of thing. Plus, you'll get it on our website, usually within a week. So you'll be able to know that not only do we receive it, it's actually on your property, usually within 1 week of mailing it to us, or excuse me, can't get it out, sorry, filing it with our office. So the next thing I want to point out is just right here, and that's Protest Online. A good majority of properties, not all neighborhoods, but a good majority of properties have the ability to not only file their protest online, but once they've submitted the protest with us, we will send you back that sales comparison grid that I showed you a while ago with the numbers on it, so you understand why we valued the property the way we did. It's a really backwards part of our system that frankly I just dislike greatly. Is the fact that we send an appraisal notice out to you and it has a value on it, and we don't tell you how we got to that value. That just doesn't seem right. What do we make you do in the state of Texas? We make you file a protest and go through this whole system just to see how we did our jobs. I'm really against that, and I will tell you that we are going to change that. I'm adamant about trying to include things like sales comparisons with the notice, so you'll understand what it is that how we did our value. We're working towards that, but I've got to make sure that we do it legally and we don't get sued later on because somebody had a problem with us doing that. So, but I think that's just ludicrous to make you guys file a protest, spend taxpayer dollars as you come in and meet with our staff just to see the information you could have seen on your notice and never had to go through the process to begin with. So, last thing I'll point out on this slide is this red house here. It's about as highlighted as we could put it on there. It's a software page, so they're real particular about how sizing and all that is. That tab is called the Market Data tab. The Market Data tab will take you to this next slide, which gives you, I kind of zoomed in. On the left-hand side, it gives you general market characteristics from Williamson County Board of Realtors. On the right-hand side, it gives you things that are happening from the Texas A&M Real Estate Research Center. So it kind of shows you for Williamson County what the market is looking like as a whole. But in the middle, I really wanted to point this area out. The first thing it gives you is property-specific characteristics of your property. So your address, the value, that sort of thing. Then here it gives you neighborhood information. That information that I showed you about your neighborhood, like the number of properties that are in your neighborhood, the median square footage, all that is contained right there on that page. Then below here, perhaps more importantly, is sales information. We had the number of sales that we have in your neighborhood, what the median sale price was of those sales, what the value range was. All of that information is included right there on that part of the slide. My favorite part of this is the next part. That big red button at the bottom, it says View Market Map, okay? Push that button, and this year, it just opens right up. Last year, I don't know if those of you are here, I showed you had to like copy your record number and place it over there. Finally got our techie guys to figure that part out. So now you push that button, and it goes right into a map of the sales. So you have now kind of what we did, the sales we used to value your properties with. Problem is, because I'm still working out those legalities we were talking about a while ago, I want to make sure that I'm legal before I put the sale prices on there. So what you can do though, is you'll see your property will be highlighted in red. I picked another property up here. That property is your property. And you're going to see dollar signs, you probably can't see them on this screen, but dollar signs on every property that we use that's sold in your neighborhood. So what's cool about that is you can click on them and you can know, oh yeah, that's that house that looks a lot like mine over on so-and-so street, right? You may not have the value or the price that was paid on that property, but at least you know it did sell. We've got that information, and you can talk to Mike at the back of the room. I know he does these and get sales information on those properties. There are websites out there now like Redfin, HomeSnap. There's a couple of them that have accurate sale prices. There's a few I wouldn't recommend. Those two I do. that you can go out and sign up and actually go in and get the sale prices as well. Talk to a local realtor, they'll get you the information. So go out here, pick the ones that you know of these sales that are a lot like yours. Don't go pick a 1,500 square foot house when yours is 2,500 square foot house or something like that. Go and pick the ones that are similar size, similar age, all that to your property. Then go and get that sales information. This is the number one piece of advice I can give you so you don't waste your time, is go find out what the market is. Your opinion right now may be that appraisal district's gotta have it wrong. There's no way it's worth this. Go make sure before you just go out and file a protest, because you're likely to waste your time if the sales tell you that the value is right. So don't just file a protest, make a decision to file a protest based on what has happened. You come in our office and we've already got all that sales information, we're just going to show it to you and not be able to do a lot for you. So why not go out and find out if, hey, you know what, the sales that they're using, this one's a better comparable, or this it does show that my house should only sell for $250,000 and they've got $270,000. Okay, well, you might have a case. Let's go ahead and file that protest if you see something like that. However, you go out there and it's exactly the opposite. We've got 260 on your property and all the sales are 270. You're not going to do you a whole lot of good to come in. Don't waste your time. We put this tool out there to get as much information in front of you as you can to make that decision on whether or not you want to file a protest. So I covered the two main parts of our website I wanted to talk to you about. That is the market dashboard and the online protest. They're both efficiency for you. We also talked a little bit about the homestead process. If you don't have your homestead, file it. It saves you money. But that pretty well wraps up what I was going to talk to you about. But I know usually when I speak, there's a lot of questions about what we do, and I'm happy to answer all those now. But I think that's the last slide. So, yes, sir.
Okay, so we have some homes in the neighborhood that are in the floodplain. So is their piece of property worth the same as a house that's not in the floodplain?
If the sales in the market tell us that it's not, it's not. If the sales in the market don't indicate one way or the other, all we know is what the sales tell us. And so, floodplain is one of those contentious issues. My property's in the floodplain, but if it's the back of your property and you're likely to never build on it anyway, then it really doesn't affect value. If people are still willing to pay the same amount for that property that has a little bit of floodplain in it than a property that doesn't. So what I always go back to is we're reporting what the market is telling us. We're a mirror reflection of it. So whatever the issue might be, if you can identify it in the sales, we should be identified in our values. But if we can't, then it probably won't. So that's how you.
We had that situation in another part of Rad Rock where the cave fell in.
Oh yeah, I'm well aware of that one.
What in the world happened to those people's property value and the tax value?
Yeah, we actually are trying to get a structural report on those to know those have been held from our notice run at this point because we just don't know what to do with them. The house has been there for over 20 years and doesn't appear to be any structural damage on them, but knowing that there's a cave under, I'm not sure I would buy it. So that's one of those things we're trying to figure it out. More than likely what we're going to have to do is get some sort of estimates from that individual that has that house on what it would take to run piers down, to make sure that their slab doesn't start getting wonky on me and start cracking and having problems.
A few years ago, they had that blasting out here in the new area. The houses had backed up to that, and some of the people that came with that said that they knew that there was a cave underneath their house, and they were concerned. And I'm just thinking, well, gosh, what if I found a cave under my house and now my property is...
Don't you wonder how many caves we have in this county?
A lot.
I mean, with all the limestone we have, there are caves all over the place. I mean, growing up, I grew up right across the street from an individual that had a cave about half the size of this room, right next to his house. He called it a storm shelter. What is? Yes.
I had a question on the land. How are you evaluating the land? Is it, closer to the railroad tracks, different, the size? Are you doing it by square feet? How are you measuring the
Usually in
price?
most residential areas, it's just a lot value based on the average price paid for a lot. If it's a neighborhood like this one that hasn't had a lot sale in years because the neighborhood was built out years ago, what we do is called abstraction. So we take the value it's sold for and we apply the percentage of the value that is typically attributed to the land. So if we look everywhere else and people are paying $50,000 for their lot, the homes are selling for $200,000, then 25% of that home price is attributed to the land, and we take y'all's home price and we multiply that 25% by it and come up with the value for your land. So that's how we come up with land values in general. Specifically in your neighborhood, I'd have to go and look exactly how each lot is valued. There probably are some differences just based on size and that, because this is an older neighborhood, so you have some variance.
Yeah, they're
variance. So I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head, but you can go out to our website and actually look at those properties that back up to, you know, the railroad track, or
they're
back up to the
creek,
lake,
or-
you know, they're pretty, are really deep lots or something like that, you know, and there's probably going to be some valuation differences on those if we've been able to, see it in the market, right? If a property is selling for more because it has a feature, or selling for less because it's up against a railroad track, we have to be able to see that in the sales to be able to put a valuation on it. The reason we have to do that is because if the state comes in and sees that those houses are selling for just like every other house in there, all of a sudden we're losing state funding for those schools, right? So we have to be right on those. The other thing is if I give you a reduction based on backing up to a railroad track, and your neighbor wants that same reduction, I have to be able to prove that there's a difference in their value and your value, even though they don't back up to the railroad track. So I have to be able to go and show, and the reason that they're 20% less is because the sales along the railroad track, here they are selling for 20% less. That's that equal and uniform method of protest I was talking about a while ago. I need to be able to prove the adjustments we're doing on your property are right based on what those sales are, so I can make those adjustments on there.
So if you find that a house is out of adjustment, do you adjust everyone else's house that falls at that adjustment?
Typically, yes, that's typically the way we do it. You know, if we figure out that the railroad track instance, that, you know, you have 2 or 3 that have come in now and we, you know, got an issue, we'll address all of them.
Then you'll send them another notice?
And not send another notice, we typically will just lower the value. The state law is we send a notice out if it goes up. We don't have to send another notice out if it goes down. We do it occasionally out of courtesy. If it's before the protest deadline and we actually notice something that's an issue, we may send it out just to prevent you from having to protest. But it's rare. Usually we find that out throughout the season that there's a problem based on additional information that we gain throughout the protest season. We may make an adjustment. Right before we certify the roll, we go through this whole process. There's too many steps to list for you, but what it is if we have additional information, additional sales in a neighborhood, for instance, let's say we started out the year, we only had 3 sales in a neighborhood of 100 properties. Not a lot to go on. However, 3 more sales came in, and we can see that we overvalued by a certain percentage. We'll take and we'll apply a new one of those neighborhood factors, that adjustment that I was talking about to move sales up or down. We'll apply a new one and lower those values before we send it over to the taxing units to establish their rate. So we've identified those and we've lowered them. Like I said, I have no desire to make them higher. I have no desire to make you pay a dime more in taxes than you really owe. I want to be fair and equal. So if we identify a problem, I want to put it on there. That's the incentive I have. I want you to pay for your fair share. I don't want to pay any more than mine either. So. Yes, sir.
If a remodel is done with a building permit through a city, how does that figure in, and when does it figure in the process to your opinion?
Sure. In an older neighborhood, that's a common question, right? Because there's a lot of houses that get remodeled every year. We do get the permits, and that's usually how we identify that there's been a remodel done. Most of the permits also have a value attached to it, a cost attached to the permit, what they're doing, and kind of a general description. So what we do with those is we will increase what's called the effective age. So your house may have been built in 1977, but you've taken and you've remodeled the entire inside of the house. So it's no longer like a 1977 year built house. It may be more like a 1990 or 2000 year built house, right? So we take depreciation away from that house. It'll never go back up to 100% good. With no depreciation, because guess what? That bone structure of the house and, you know, the framing and all that is still the same 1977 framing that was there before. But what we will do is we'll take away depreciation, make that value higher when we know it. Those permits are filed throughout the year. We try to identify all those, change those effective ages, and make that change for the January 1 evaluation the following year. And so if it happened in June, we notice it. When we're doing that valuation process, I showed it on the calendar a while ago, in that February, March time frame, we'll adjust that effective age, and that depreciation will come off, and that value will go up.
And if you turn 65 during that time, it doesn't count for a remodel, does it? Remodels and additions.
Right, if you already had a freeze on your property, you had a 60, over 65 exemption and freeze, new value is not calculated in that freeze, it's added to the top of that freeze, basically. So it does affect the amount of taxes paid.
And remember, the freezes are a dollar amount.
Yeah, but
The freeze- the freeze-
it's actually a ratio of tax paid. So when I say that, it's saying, Larry explains this way better than I do, so I'm gonna turn it over to him for just 30 seconds, let us explain.
So I think what he's saying, if you remodel the inside of your house, you're not going to see an increase in your freeze, only if you add a pool or enclose your garage or add an outhouse or something, an outbuilding, a storage building to your
Hey, some people might like that.
property. If you add something to your existing structure, then we're going to add the added value and calculate the added value times the current tax rate and add that to your current freeze.
Based on the percentage of your current freeze, right?
There's no percentages involved, it's just value times rate equals this amount. When you turn 65, that's your frozen amount. And again, in Round Rock here, that's only going to be for your school district and the county and county road and bridge. ACC, City of Round Rock, and Upper Brushy Creek. The county freezes.
County freezes also.
Yeah, county freezes and county road and bridge. But the other three districts, City of Round Rock, Upper Brushy Creek, WCID, and ACC, do not freeze. So those are going to fluctuate with the fluctuation in value and tax rates. But if you just do a remodel on the inside of your house, removing that depreciation the way he talked about is not going to affect your freeze. It's only when you go and add another structure to your property, an additional
Something
improvement.
that is new to the property.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and that, let's say this is the interior of your house, if we were to take and put sheetrock and nice new carpet in here, this was already in existence at the time of your freeze, so that's not going to add value on top of your freeze. But if we were to do an addition outside of this and put another room, that would add value.
So as we get close to 65, which we are, should we do the remodel before or after?
Get your value as low as possible.
Yeah.
Let it depreciate, don't do anything, don't touch anything, and then after you turn 65,
Then do the
then
remodel.
remodel the inside, let him do the adjustments on the depreciation, you'll be set.
That's right. So Larry calculates the freezes, and I was like, I'm gonna butcher this. I know I've done it in the past. Larry's real good at explaining that, so I appreciate you being here, Larry, and doing that. The ratio that I was talking about, Larry, you could probably explain this better, is if you were to move to another house after you turn 65, and part of the transporting your freeze to another property is the ratio of tax paid. So for instance, if you're paying, I'm gonna use real round figures, $500 now on a tax bill that would normally be $1,000, you have a 50% portability. So you go to another property that would normally have a $2,000 tax, you're only going to pay $1,000. You're still paying that 50%. So that ratio I was talking about is when you transfer to another property.
That's correct.
Another property in the state of Texas, right?
Well, it transfers specifically on the school district taxes anywhere in the state of Texas. Because Williamson County freezes, if you move within Williamson County, that same ratio is applied if you stay in Williamson County, so.
Yeah. But if you move to another county that doesn't freeze, then that's not going
You're
to
paying
apply.
100% of the taxes.
How much you hear in Austin area about those huge buildings downtown and whether they're paying their fair share of taxes? So,
I don't think we have time for me to get on.
so are people fighting you a lot on the businesses here?
You want to talk about it? You've heard me talk about it a lot.
I'll say something. I'm glad you brought that up, Kirby. So Alvin and I have done presentations at school board conferences in San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, Austin. We've done 5, Corpus. This equal and uniform that he talked about earlier, for the most of us in here who are homeowners, he's not going to adjust your property valuation by more than a couple percent. You know, no matter what happens, he's very accurate on that. We've done a presentation. He does a great job on that. But just like you said, all those skyscrapers in Austin, all of those factories, all of those hotels that are built, they'll put in the paper that it costs $100 million, $200 million, $500 million to build it. And then they'll turn around and they will sue the appraisal district and say, it's only worth $50 million. And they'll go out and they'll do the equal and uniform and they'll abuse that. So it's kind of a quiet rule. We've done presentations. We've met with legislators. He's done a great job meeting with our legislators across here in Central Texas. But there's a list, and every month when we have a board meeting, the appraisal district board meeting, there's a list of all the companies, there's retail places around here that are suing him. And HEB has done it, O'Reilly, some of these Walgreens, La Frontera, some of these places, Lowe's, they come in, and these companies are based out of the state. They're based in New York, or New Jersey, or Michigan, or North Carolina, whatever. They hire lawyers to come in and sue Alvin and say, look, we're going to, and legally from a commercial property, they can go and pick what they want to compare to. You and I can't go and pick, hey, I want to go across a railroad track and compare my home to those 1,500 square foot houses across the highway, across the railroad track or somewhere else. Commercial properties can do that, so you're right. And what's happening is it pushes more and more burden on the homeowners to pay for roads and school teachers and bridges and everything else because the tax rate keeps going up. So Alvin's done a great job trying to relay that information. I'm doing the best I can as a trustee because it's hurting us. Because we're now, all of us, everybody who lives in this neighborhood, who's in this room, is now part of the Robin Hood program, or the Robin Hood recapture from the state. Because our property values are going up so fast, our enrollment isn't growing as fast. So now we have to start sending money back to the state. It gets redistributed to Hutto or Del Valley or Florence or whatever ISD. We don't mind sharing that, but it's such a convoluted system, it's painful. And Austin is the largest recapture district in the state of Texas. They will send about a third of every tax dollar that homeowner pays, about a third of that goes to neighboring districts or goes to the Valley or West Texas or out of these malls.
The average person sends $2,000 of their own tax revenue to outside of their own jurisdiction.
So it's very difficult, and the good news out of all of this is people are starting to wake up and say we can't keep going this way, because in Round Rock we have a great mixture of commercial property and residential property. Austin has way too much commercial property. All those skyscrapers and very few children there. It's terrible for them because they have to send it all back. Leander, right next door to us, Leander ISD, they're the other one. They have too many houses and not enough commercial property.
Pflugerville also.
Pflugerville is also. Hutto doesn't have as much property. We do a presentation, and we are always all these places. But like I said, Alvin does a great job of trying to raise that awareness, and it might take 2 or 3 more cycles, but hopefully the legislature will one day wake up and say, if we're going to keep growing as a society here in Texas and being a great place to live, we've got to fix something with the commercial property valuation. That's my version. I'll let you give your version.
I'm going to step on my soapbox for just a minute. So first, I know Mike's a realtor in here. How many other realtors are there in the area? There's 2? Okay. So Texas is what's called a non-sales disclosure state. Okay, so that means that you do not have to file the sale amount of your property when you buy it with any local government or anyone. So remember, I told you have to be at 100% of market value by state law. Yet we can't get the sales, and so we don't get all of them. And so it's kind of like doing your job with a hand tied behind your back. It's really hard to get value, except for residential property. Residential property sales are available all over the place these days. I mentioned those websites a while ago where you can go out and get sales. There's realtors that bring in sales information. We do sales questionnaires. We get probably 90% of the sales for residential properties in our county. And we use those sales to value with. So everybody gets to that 100% level that I was talking about a while ago. So guess what? You guys are paying at your 100%. Where it's really a problem is commercial properties, large commercial properties in particular, because those commercial properties don't have to file their sales either. And instead of getting 90% of the sales, we're lucky to get 20. And so with 20% of the sales, how accurate of a valuation do you think we're doing on commercial properties? Not only that, we have to defend those values when we send them out. So what do we use to defend those values? Sales. If we don't have very many, they never seem to ever catch what the market value is on a large commercial property because we don't have the information to get there. So let me explain to you that disparity. If we're sitting at 70% of market value on commercial properties, and you guys are sitting at 100% of market value on residential properties, Who's paying their fair share and then some? You are. Not those commercial guys, not those guys that are based out of New Jersey and like they get to take their money back and run with it because we're not getting the information we need to be able to value everybody accordingly. Now I'll let these guys comment because I bet they're chomping at the bit to do so, but I'm going to tell you the two things that I've always been explained to by realtors is the reason that they don't want sales disclosure. First, the number one priority was we never want a sales transaction tax. We never want to have to pay sales tax. If I sell my home, I don't have to pay sales tax on that transaction. I totally get that. Can you imagine paying the 8% sales tax a quarter that we pay on your house? It'd be extremely high for sales tax, right? So 2 sessions ago, they took care of that. There's now a constitutional amendment that's taken place that there will never be a transaction tax on real estate. That's gone. Gone. So you can't do that. The other part of the equation that they always mention is privacy. It's nobody's business what I pay for my house. Well, I just mentioned that there are several residential websites out there that are giving all those sales away to everybody that wants to log into their website, so that's really not true anymore. I could understand it back in the day where nobody knew what anybody was paying because nobody was telling anybody, but today it's out there on residential. Guess who gets to take advantage of that though? Large commercial. Their sales aren't out there, so, and they've got a lot of money to go down and lobby the legislature to keep that from happening. I just wanted to dispel the myth that it's not privacy, it's not sales transaction taxes. It's the fact that large commercial likes to keep as much of their tax revenue as they can and let that burden be placed on every one of you and me. I can't stand that fact within our state. I think it's a complete inequity. We're only about we're about 5 or 6 states out of the entire United States that have no sales disclosure. And we are the most property tax state out of any of those, way more than any of the other ones. So if we want to be a fair property tax, the only way we can ever get there is to get the information and put the value on the property. Go ahead, Mike.
I agree with you. I don't. The law that he's talking about that was passed in the legislature was primarily pushed by real estate agents. The Texas Association of Realtors lobbied that we pay dues every month to them, and they lobbied the legislature to pass that transaction tax bill. And it was because of a lot of their lobbying that passed, because we were fighting for it. If you realized you were going to get taxed 8% on the sale of your house, would you sell your house? We'd be living in the same house we bought 40 years ago and never moved. So that would have been horrendous for the market, would have been horrendous for homeowners, it would have been horrendous for all of us in the real estate business. On the commercial side, I get calls all the time. I do some commercial, and I get calls from people, what'd you sell that property over there for? What'd you, and I can mention one of the sites that he won't mention. Do not ever go to Zillow, okay, and look at their Zestimates. They have a huge lawsuit against them right now because of their Zestimates, okay? They are notorious for incorrect information, okay? And again, there's Mary Beth and myself, but there's a lot of real estate agents that live in this neighborhood. Feel free to contact one of us, and there's been this discussion out there that we want values high and that we're discouraging people to protest. That's not true, okay? If we were discouraging people to protest, we wouldn't be bringing Alvin in here to talk about it. It's to our benefit, living here in the neighborhood, because Mary Beth lives in the neighborhood also, to keep the neighborhood a good, nice, affordable place to live. I pay the same taxes you guys pay. I'm going to fight to keep the values at a fair level. So feel free to contact any real estate agent that you find that you feel knows the neighborhood, and they can help you with a lot of this information. And look at we can do the same comparable reports that they do, where they're add for a pool, subtract for a pool, and so forth. But the information is out there, and we're glad to help, but I'm with you on, yes, we need to do something about that commercial disparity.
We're going to time for one more question.
Looks like we got one hand. Go ahead.
He just mentioned something about the pools and different things, and that was part of my specifics thing. When you say, for example, one property has a pool and another property doesn't, what is the valuation system used to value the pool?
It's sales again. So what we do is we do a sales study of every property with a pool, and we look at properties that are as close to that property as we can get. Size, quality, age, all that's sold without a pool, and that difference we attribute to the pool, right? And so we do a study based on the quality level of each home. And so you can imagine a low quality house with a pool, it probably doesn't attribute as much of value because people don't want a pool when they have young kids and that sort of thing. Or a high quality house like in Cimarron Hills, for instance, if you're familiar with that, they're probably going to want a pool in that neighborhood, and it's expected to have a pool in that neighborhood because of the quality level of the house. So they obviously attribute different percentages or different amounts based on the quality of the house itself. And Mike will tell you the same thing. I guarantee when he's out pricing homes and wants to see what a pool is worth, he goes to the sales as well and tries to say, okay, what is this pool going to add to the value of that property? And it's based on other sales out there. The answer usually is on any adjustment we're trying to make, we use you guys, the market participants, to tell us what they're worth. We're just trying to reflect what you guys are telling us.
Do you take into consideration age and type versus
Age and type of the
in-ground?
pool?
Yes, in-ground versus above ground, or
No
10-year
above ground or on the roll.
pool versus 2-year?
No above ground or on the roll. Fiberglass pools are less, and concrete pools are typically valued all the same, within a quality level. There used to be measurements taken of the pool itself and all this kind of stuff, and we realized the market's telling us it really doesn't matter the size of the pool very much. It just matters if it's there or not. And so the sales are telling us that the pool could be an Olympic-sized swimming pool, or it could be a puddle. And people that want a pool at their house are going to pay about the same amount. The contributory value of that property is about the same amount. That's an important term. Let me explain that. It may cost you $40 or $50 or $60,000 to put a pool in your property, and almost every realtor will tell you that you'll never get that value out of that pool.
Never.
Right? Never get that value. So what we look at is what is the contributory value now that you have a pool to what it would sell for, what it would add to the value of your property. And that's why we go to the sales to tell us. We don't go to the cost of the pool. We don't go to Cody Pools and say, well, what would this pool cost to put in? We go to other properties that sold with pools and properties that sold without them and try to figure out how much value they're worth.
So you don't consider if a pool is 10 years old or 30 years old versus one that's 1 or 2. They're the same value.
There will be
You don't-
depreciation charged against that pool, just like it is the rest of the house. So if it's a 1980 year built pool, just like the house itself is a 1980 year built house, there's going to be depreciation charged against that. So in other words, it'll be lower value than one that was built today. So the age does contribute to the depreciation.
If you go to the website on your property, you can drop down improvements, and it'll list the years that they're listing those improvements going in. The year the pool was put in, the year room addition was put in, and I put a small pool in for my wife's health reasons this past summer, okay? And then I got a tax increase of $28,000, okay? That was a one-piece, nice in-ground fiberglass pool. It wasn't an expensive gun. I paid more than $28,000 for it. I ain't saying how much, but but it didn't add $28,000 to the value of the house. I couldn't sell my house for $28,000 more just because it has this pool. So, on that pool that I put in, I might get $10,000 more for it.
I'm just thinking some of them are so bad that it could be less than.
Well, again, like you said, it's the fact that they have a pool. I mean, you can get a pool resurfaced for $9,000, okay? Then you've got as good as a new pool, as long as it's not leaking or structurally out of place. Okay? And I know that because I did one on another property. So it can be made new, and like you said, but you're still enjoying the depreciation of it. But the valuation on a pool, when we're doing market analysis on a home, I might use $15,000, maybe 20 at the most. If it's a really, really nice house with a nice pool.
Let me jump in real quick just for, and Larry, I don't know if you want to say anything in general, but think about it for a minute, I might come back to it. I want to say this, everybody get one of these in the mail, Texas Star and Texas Pro Tax. I don't know if you guys got these in the mail.
Oh yeah, throw those in the trash.
So I was going to say, there's some real detailed information on here. It's very appealing. I did my protest last year to talk to Alvin first and said, I'm going to do it. He said, by all means. So I don't get any discount being on the board for being appraisal, but I went through the process. If any of you want to look at my protest, what they did last year, I'll show you. But I'm glad you brought this up. You don't need to pay somebody to do what these guys do. Like Alvin said, call a realtor here, do a quick rundown, and then go to the website and you can get all the information.
They send these out all the time offering for a fee to protest your taxes. You don't need to pay anybody to help.
You don't need to. They'll say, how would you like, this one I think was one says, how would you like to save $2,000 a year or something? I don't know what it was, $1,600 a year. Sure, I'd like to save that, but in reality, I don't think they can do anything that Alvin and a good set of realtor, resources about that. I just want to put that in. I don't mean to interrupt anything, but I just want to say, Larry, if you have any comments on the tax collection or anything like that.
Larry didn't show up for that. He's in shorts and a shirt back there. I think he wanted to sit in the back.
I've got some comments, but I don't want to pontificate on Alvin's time. These questions are really good questions here.
I have a question for you. So what is the maximum that you can increase? Is it 10%? Is it
Homestead 10%.
Yeah, the market value is going to follow the market. So we're going to go up whatever the market value is selling. It's what you're going to pay taxes on if it is your homestead, your primary residence. You have a homestead exemption on file with us. The maximum increase will be at 10%. So yeah, you're right, 10%. But it's
So if
only on
someone's
your
went
property.
out 19,000 or way more than that, why? And then obviously they would fight it.
Because of
Why?
state law. State law won't let them go more than 10%. If you go online and you look at your
But it
valuation.
did. I had someone contact me this last.
Market value will go
They're-
up as much as market value needs to go up. So whatever those sales are telling us, if it's telling us it's a 20% increase is justified in that house, we're going to increase it 20%. What that person, if it's their homestead, what that person will pay is on a 10% increase.
You'll see homestead cap loss. It'll say homestead cap loss on the website. It's a negative number. That means the valuation is reduced by that much because of the 10% state law. Any other
I get
questions?
that one a lot.
Anybody? You guys gonna
Yeah,
hang around for a little bit for questions?
so when Round Rock got Delta moved out here, didn't they give them some kind of a break on school taxes for a certain number of years?
It was no sales tax stuff, that was not property tax.
It was property tax, there was an abatement on Dell for a while, there was also what they call a 380 or 381 agreement, where they were getting a tax refund after they paid their tax, right, and they get some of their tax revenue back. It was all property tax related.
And the same thing's going on with Kalahari.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was my next question. So we are still doing it.
It's decreasing. Okay? It's decreasing, I don't know what the numbers are. All right, thank you guys.